Aging is not something icky and depressing old people do. It is the journey upon which each of us embarks the day we're born. Aging is living, right? We don't wake up old someday.
Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast. I'm your host, Kavita, and the founder of Power Purpose Play, a global community of women in midlife. I'm here to tell you that it's your time now to rediscover what has always been inside of you and bring that out into the world. If you're wondering what's next, but don't know quite what that is, or if you feel a twinge in your heart telling you that you have so much more to do and so much more to offer, you're in the right place. Ask yourself, if not now, when? Do you want to leave your job, start your own business, take control of your health, reignite the passion in your marriage, write that book, or at least that first chapter? Transitions like this can be daunting, but through listening to my story and interviews with incredible women every week, I hope to inspire you to take action. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of the Midlife Reinvention Podcast. And I'm your host, Kavita Ahuja, and I'm the founder of Power Purpose Play. And we are a global platform amplifying the personal growth and inner power of women in midlife. In this podcast, as you know, we discuss many important topics that we all face, such as, for example, how to find our true calling moving forward in life, tapping into our creativity, dealing with health scares and other obstacles, and renewing our relationships, among so many other topics. But one topic that we all face is that of getting older. And this topic is rarely discussed in society. And I'm honored to actually have on our show today a woman who is a leading authority for a movement to mobilize against discrimination on the basis of age. I'm happy to introduce to you Ashton Applewhite. Ashton is the author of This Chair Rocks, a manifesto against ageism. And she is a leading spokesperson for the emerging movement to raise awareness on ageism and how to dismantle it. Ashton has been recognized by the New York Times, the New Yorker, National Public Radio, and the American Society on Aging as an expert on ageism. She blogs at This Chair Rocks and is the voice of Yo, Is This Ageist? Ashton speaks widely at venues that have ranged from the United Nations to the TED main stage. She has written for Harper's, The Guardian, and the New York Times, and is a co-founder of the Old School Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse. Wow, that's amazing, Ashton. I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. And I'm happy to point out to your listeners right off the bat that I had no education in ageism or aging, no professional affiliations, no advanced degrees, and no idea that I was going to be doing this until I hit my mid-50s.
Is that right? Interesting. Okay, well, that leads right into the first question as to how did you lead into this? I mean, your accomplishments, I just read them off, and obviously they're so impressive. And you were also named the Influencer of the Year in Ageism, and you've written a book on it, and you have been described in the book, as I was reading it, as a apprehensive boomer to pro-aging radical. Can you explain that a bit, and how did you get to where you are now?
Well, let me link it back. Let me give an initial long answer, because my first serious book was written for women.
Okay.
It is called Cutting Loose: Why Women Who End Their Marriages Do So Well. And it came out in the early 90s, and it was catalyzed by a chance comment of my attorney's that more and more of his clients were women who were realizing they did not have to stick it out in marriages that were really, really not working for them. And so I went home to the baby internet and found out in 2 seconds that 2/3 of divorces were initiated by women. And it's been that way forever. It's not a function of bra burning in the 70s or anything. You could have knocked me over with a feather. I assumed it was like 98% guys dumping their sad, old, wrinkled, middle-aged wives like me for perfect trophy versions and so on. And that's not true. And so I became obsessed with why so few people know that. And that is what led me to become a writer. I had not written until then. I was 41 when I got divorced, and really launched me on this career. And 15 years later, in my mid 50s, I realized I was very, very apprehensive about getting older. And I started researching longevity and interviewing people over 80, and realized again, within a matter of weeks, if not months, these are not like, I didn't dig around for the happy facts.
Mm-hmm.
They're floating at the top of the internet, that almost everything I thought I knew about getting older was way off base, way too negative, or not nuanced enough, or just wrong. So it was writing a book was really awful. I never, ever wanted to write another book. And I admit, for a while there, I was like, oh, I'll just be modern and I'll tweet and I'll blog. But it was the same sort of thing. Why don't people know these things? Why don't people know that we are happier in late life than in midlife?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we know that the percentage of Americans, Canadians, it's almost as low. Percentage of Americans over 65 in nursing homes is down from, in the time I've been thinking about this, from 4% to less than 2%. I think it's Canada, it's 3%.
Really?
Yes. The longer we live, the less we fear dying.
Yes.
That was what I was doing. Like, really, really, really. I was so skeptical. And
sorry to interrupt. The other one thing that in your TED Talk, you also mentioned that dementia rates are dropping.
Dementia rates are dropping,
which is
exactly.
That really surprised me.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's not that our fears are not real. I am not some whitewashing, gray washing Pollyanna here that it's all going to be great, especially if you just have a good attitude. But the point is that our fears are way out of proportion to the reality. And the larger point is that our fears are fed by social and economic forces that do not have our best interests at heart.
Mm-hmm.
The reason most women don't know that there is life after divorce, except we sort of know it, which is why we decide we have to get the hell out, and not to make light of it. It's a really, really difficult decision, as it should be, is because, newsflash, we live in a patriarchy and a capitalist society where if women... There's a great quote in the book from Mary Catherine Bateson, who was Margaret Mead's daughter: "The marriage serves the man and the wife serves the marriage," which is, of course, a generalization, but in a traditional, heteronormative, patriarchal, capitalist society, that's the way it works. And so there are forces that want everyone to stay married and stay in their little house and buy your own washing machine and have your 2.5 straight children and so on, right? And have nothing to do with what is best for us individually or even necessarily your marriage, right? But they are systems in which women have less power and less voice. Oh, and I have to brag about one thing. My book, for any of you who saw the TV show about the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, what was it called? Help me out here. With Cate Blanchett.
Oh.
We'll come to it. You're going to dump it in. But the anti-hero of that piece, played by Cate Blanchett, is Phyllis Schlafly, who single-handedly tanked the Equal Rights Amendment by framing it as a family values issue, which was brilliant. And my book earned me a spot on Phyllis Schlafly's enemies list.
Okay.
So Mrs. America is the name of this.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Right. So those forces are the reason that so few of us know that 2/3 of divorces are initiated by women. And the same forces, because guess what? We still live under capitalism. We still live in a patriarchy, but it's also a sexist world and an ageist world, right? And as long as we are afraid of ageism and afraid of aging, as long as we can be persuaded that it's a problem, we can be persuaded to buy stuff to try and fix it or hide it, right? If natural changes of aging are pathologized, we can be persuaded to buy stuff to try and cure or stop it. And so no one makes money off satisfaction.
Right.
And people stay in power when people with less power are fighting about who's got the better idea, whether moms in the paid workforce are better moms than moms who stay at home, instead of joining forces to challenge these larger structures that harm us all.
Okay, you said a lot there, and
That was a really big answer.
No, it was great. I wanted to kind of filter out some of the things that kind of caught my attention. One is that you started this in your mid-50s, and
I did.
And the other thing that really struck me is that you said in the beginning, you said that you didn't have like official education or whatever in PhD in ageism or whatever, but you followed your curiosity, it seemed, because you were questioning, why don't people know these facts? You talked about the facts of ageism and some of the facts about women who are divorcing. And so that's really fascinating to me, because also I've started this venture after the age of 50. And that's the whole purpose of this platform. So tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what gave you the courage to do that? Like what led you? And I mean, I don't know what you were doing before, but what led you to just say, okay, I don't really care like how old I am or what people say or what my obstacles may be, but how did you find the courage to go after that?
Well, I will say that I had no idea that I would end up writing a book or becoming a public figure. It's not why I did it, but I am, and let's of course not neglect the role of privilege. I am a white upper middle class woman to start with, and I have some money in the bank, and I had a part-time job, and I had rental income from a rental property too. So I could afford to devote a whole bunch of time to this without having to make money off it. So that's part of it. I'm also just I don't like writing, but I like thinking. And I am and have always been a curious person. So the sort of noodling around and learning stuff to start with was pleasing to me. And I don't think I do have a 4-year college degree, but I could never figure out even what to major in. I am a generalist. And so, but if you had told me 15 years ago that I would be fascinated by aging, I would have said, ooh, why do I want to think about something icky and depressing?
Right.
And aging is not something icky and depressing. Old people do. It is the journey upon which each of us embarks the day we're born. Aging is living, right? We don't wake up old someday. So, and as we already know, just from the million directions each one of these questions could go into, every aspect of it touches politics, touches biology, touches economics, touches sociology. So it is, if you're someone like me who wants to think about how we humans are in the world in the most multidimensional way, aging is a perfect fit. So I started to research, and then I decided these things called blogs were happening. So I, with a little help from, I hate to admit it, but a young guy who was technically adept, here's what a blog is, and here's how WordPress works. And I've learned these things. I'm certainly not particularly technologically adept, but I have learned the things I need to learn to put my voice out there, as we all do. We do learn. I mean, I think women in particular, we have to be adaptable. And I think each of us, if I bet your learners, if they had to master nuclear physics in order to feed their kids, they'd figure it out, right?
Right.
What we need to learn.
Yes.
So it just became, it was intrinsically interesting. It was intrinsically surprising. And also, I am brave. I think I just was born that way. And I think I got this from my mother, but a social conscience, that sounds so sanctimonious, but it made me angry.
Yes.
That these forces were out there and sort of keeping us in the dark. I mean, they're out there. We're in the dark because we choose to stay in the dark to some degree, but it's also those messages proliferate everywhere and surround us. And you have to work a lot harder to get at the full truth. And that made me angry. And once I got a bug up my ass, I was off and running.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I'm persistent also. I am by nature dogged. And I think that's a real plus. Well, I think that in a way, I'm lucky in that persistence, I think, comes more easily to me than it does to a lot of other people.
You mentioned some traits. So you said you're surprised that you're brave, socially conscious, you got angry. And I think that points to your values, and you were persistent. So I think,
there's a lot of messages out there that women shouldn't get angry.
Right. Well,
and I think anger has a purpose.
Yeah. And exactly. So this is what I'm trying to really amplify, is that for women, firstly, if you have something that's in your heart and you feel like you really need to do it, find out what that is and what your strengths are to bring it out into the world, firstly. And then also think about your values. Like, what do you really value? And if you have something to say, and if you have, everyone has a unique talents. If you have those talents and something to say so just say it. And like you said, be brave and stick to your values and stick to what you think that people can learn from. So I wanted to get that from you. So thank you for that.
Well, I don't love the sort of message that's out in a lot of places. Find your passion, because it seems very daunting. Oh, I should learn to paint like Picasso, or I should learn to master Rachmaninoff. I think it's really important to realize, and there's a concurrent message in Ageland, that people age well if they have a purpose. Your purpose can be to see your kids graduate from high school. Your purpose can be to help plant a community garden. Your purpose can be to plant your own damn garden. Your purpose does not have to be, you don't have to envision it in its entirety to begin with. So many things start small. I started this because I was afraid of getting old. And it's focused initially on my own experience and what I learned and how it changed about how I felt in the world in relation to my own aging. And then as I learned more, I was able to figure out how to make the message, I hope, move out in the world. But you don't have to figure out all this stuff. But anything anyone feels strongly about or is genuinely curious about, that will convey. I mean, I've done a lot of interviews. I've been on your side of the mic talking to anyone who is interested in what they do. They can be an exterminator. They could be a chemical engineer
100%.
studying some arcane thing of why one atom sticks to another. If you are genuinely curious about what they do and ask good follow-up questions, it will be interesting to you and to them. Yes. So I don't want people to feel overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I don't know what the thing is. Maybe you're just on your way to the thing.
Yes.
And that's the first step is the path.
Exactly.
A friend of mine say, we create the path by walking it.
Yes. And the first step is the step, right?
Exactly.
Yes. And that's so true, because having the purpose thing, like finding your purpose, can be so daunting.
Very overwhelming.
Yeah, very overwhelming. And I so love what you said, because it doesn't have to be this huge thing. It can be whatever is more important to you. And oftentimes in social media and in the media in general, you see these really successful people, and a lot of women who come to me say, well, I could never do that, or I could never have a following like that, or I could never start a business like that. I'm like, well, you don't have to, because that's that person. What do you want to do? Right. So that's wonderful. I just wanted to go back a little bit.
Or what do you want to do tomorrow? What do you want to do next week? Not what do you
exactly.
What do you want to do 10 years from now?
So how do you feel about visioning though? Do you think that's important?
I haven't done it. I mean, I don't have an intelligent answer.
Okay.
I'm sure that there are all sorts of practices of self-care and meditation that I keep meaning to make time for and don't. So, but I don't have anything smart to say about those practices. I mean, I try and take decent care of my health and not work all the time.
Yeah, I think, I think having that first step, the step that in my opinion, I also believe that having kind of a goal and like a vision, like it doesn't have to be precise, but it kind of
specific.
It doesn't have to be specific. It can be like a feeling even, right? So that can guide you. So that's another topic.
That makes sense. I mean, in the beginning, my partner, who has been extremely supportive, but in the beginning, he was a little skeptical that I could get to a broader place, have a more political message if I was so rooted in sort of the personal transformation. But that's the only way I knew how to do it. And that's all I knew at that point. And it felt right to me, and I stuck with it. And I was right.
So I wanted to go back, listen to your TED Talk. And for those of you the listeners who haven't listened to it, I would highly encourage it, because it's really interesting. And just for the sake of the listeners who may not know, what is the definition of ageism, and what does that mean really to society?
The dictionary definition is discrimination and stereotyping on the basis of age. It's really a set of ideas and social practices around the notion of making any kind of generalization about a person or a group of people on the basis of how old you think they are.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a complimentary stereotype. Old people are wise. That is a benevolent stereotype. It's not true. Some old people are wise. Some old people are idiots. And it is likewise, you are too young for that. Younger people experience a lot of ageism too. One manifestation of the ageist world we live in is that we don't really care about kids or schools because kids don't vote and kids don't have money, right? Because we live under capitalism. That's a function very broadly writ of ageism too. We also live in a youth-obsessed society because youth is commodified, like thinness is commodified and whiteness and not having wrinkledness. And so older people by far bear the brunt of ageism. The message is generally, young is good, old is bad, to oversimplify. But it is any judgment on the basis of age, any assumption about what a person is capable of. And interestingly, I think a really critical fact here is that the longer we live, the more different from one another we become. If you think about it, every newborn is unique, but 17-year-olds, who are all different from each other, have a lot more in common developmentally, physically, socially, than 37-year-olds who are way more alike than 57-year-olds. So the older a person is, the less their age tells you about what they're like, what they're capable of, what they're interested in.
Really interesting. As I read your book and listened to your podcast or your TED Talk, I was thinking about what I do. We all do have these stereotypes in daily things that we say and do.
We all do.
And I was checking myself. I'm like, and actually what you're saying about having the ageist for younger people, the stereotypes. And I think I do that with my kids. You don't, you're not old enough. You don't know what you're talking about. So it's so important to really.
Well, that is the first, I salute you, because that is the first critical step that is looking at our own biases, especially when it comes to age, because it's so unexamined. Most of us, sometimes I think of what I'm doing as washing a dirty window. It's really dirty because these are new ideas to people, but you can see where you've been. Right? But around racism too, if we say, well, I'm not racist, I'm a good white person, you're never going to make any progress. Where the first step is, of course, to acknowledge, just like every other person on the planet, I am biased. But the good news is that and that is uncomfortable. No one wants to admit they're biased. But once you honestly reflect on the way in which you are part of the problem or complicit a little bit, then it is it's like letting a genie out of a bottle. Your eyes open to the way it is manifest and supported in the society around you. And that is really liberating. Or it's not, that's what happened with consciousness raising around the women's movement. Women got together and compared notes and realized that the fact that they had no power in their marriage, or their boss was patting them on the butt, or they couldn't get listened to in any arena, was not because they were failing in any way. It was not the fault. It was not a personal problem or a personal failing. These were social and political issues that we could come together and do something about. And that is really liberating. But you don't get there without that first uncomfortable step of oh crap. And I still do I just did it. I still do say and do ageist things. And one of them is that doggone word still. The use of still is an ageist habit. Why should I say still?
Right. I just do it. I don't still do it. I just do it.
We all do it. Yeah. But unless you're still climbing Everest at 103, if you are working, if you are having sex, if you are practicing Rachmaninoff, no still. Why stick that word in when it applies to daily activities like working and driving and having sex and being out in the world?
Those are so practical. And when I speak to a lot of the women that are in my community, they say that Well, I don't know. I'm just too old to do that. I think I've already done all of this great stuff in my life, and I don't know if I can start something new and all these.
That's a perfect call out. Perfect call out, Kavita.
Yes.
When you say I'm too old,
Yeah.
what do you really mean? It's never age. You might be, if it is a question of physical capacity, which is the one thing that inevitably declines with age, you might be too weak or too frail, but another person your age might be in great shape. So it's not about age, even in that example, right? When someone says I'm too old, they might be too scared. They might be too poor.
Yeah.
They might be too burdened with their 17 grandchildren or triplets or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
But it is never about age. And if we strip the age away from it, then we can get to the underlying reasons, whether they're completely legit or perhaps sort of thrown up as a way to postpone doing the scary thing.
Yes. And that goes back to the courage, right? That we were talking about earlier. Excellent. So one other thing I just wanted to point out, and also this is you had a New York Times opinion piece, and it was about, I have a little quote here, working to disarm women's anti-aging demon.
That was the New York Times title. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you say that aging is harder for women and that we face the double whammy of ageism and sexism. You touched on this a little bit before, but maybe you can kind of delve into that a little bit more, and how can we possibly reverse that, or at least begin to reverse that in society?
Hi, my friend. Kavita here. Do you often feel blocked from moving forward? We all feel that way at times. These are referred to as energy blocks. I've created a short, actionable PDF guide to help you release your negative energy blocks. Click the link in the description to download it now for free. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, the most common manifestation of it is in this cursed focus on women's appearance, which is not really about beauty. It's about power. It's about obedience. It's about conforming to a norm which is set by a capitalist patriarchy. If you and I are busy measuring up to see who looks younger, who looks thinner, who looks better, we are competing. We are not joining forces against these larger structures that benefit when you and I are squabbling and competing and spending lots of money on this stuff. I mean, I'm sure you know about the pink tax, the fact that products for women are priced more expensively than for men, even though women earn less. But sexism, both sexism and ageism, they pervade all aspects of our culture, of course, as with race, as with gender. It's all, that's the premise of intersectionality, that all these things combine and shape each other and each person's life in a unique way. If you look at the workforce, women are never the right age in the workforce. When we're young, we're not taken seriously, or we're sexualized, or we're not taken seriously because we are reduced to sexual objects. Then once you hit the workforce, if you're penalized, women stop being promoted to managerial jobs in the United States. It starts at age 34 because you might have children. Either you have children or you might have children. And we all know your uterus and your brain cannot work at the same time. And also if a woman becomes a mother, her pay goes down. When a man becomes a father, his pay goes up.
Really?
Do not get me started on the gender wage gap, which has barely budged in 20 years. And then back to women never being the right age. First, you're penalized because you are too sexy. Then you're penalized because you're too fertile. And then 5 minutes after that, you're not fertile anymore. So then that's when all the really evil myths and stuff set in. That's why our fear about menopause is so enormous. That's why menopause has been in the closet for so long. And it's really great to see women exposing it and saying, but the reason we're afraid of menopause is because it signifies the end of fertility, which is real. We can't pretend that there is not in women's lives that demarcation. but that's being linked. Why should our value as human beings or workers or anything be linked to our reproductive status? And you see that in the way old women are, or older women are, any group of older women is referred to as grannies. I am a grandmother. I love being a grandmother, but I don't want my collective political identity to be linked to whether or not I had children.
Right.
It's another way to put women into a hierarchy of value that we didn't create and that does not serve our interests. Plus, it's heteronormative. It's huge class stuff. And the whole message that women should work, one of my least favorite phrases is successful aging. Men age, quote unquote, successfully if they stay active.
And they're like fine wine, right?
But women age successfully by appearing to not age in our appearance,
yes,
which reinforces the underlying idea. What's the most important thing about you and me? How we look, not what we do, not how we think, not what our values are, how we look. And then we are expected to spend enormous amounts of money doing something impossible, which sets us up to fail. It makes us compete, right?
Yeah.
And also these remedies for life, remedies for waking up a day older, are available only to the well-off, relatively so. So there's a huge class bias. If you are worried about where your next meal is coming from, you don't have time for leisure or
wrinkles,
Botox or self-care of all sorts.
Yeah. So you've been doing this now for how long?
I am 69 now, so 15 years.
Okay.
Almost. Yeah.
So have you noticed a shift? Has there been, like, from when you started to now?
Yeah.
I'm sure you're doing this within organizations as well. You're spreading the word within organizations, are you? Or is it?
To some degree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. I had to self-publish my book originally. I won't name the publisher, but the publisher who published my divorce book, and the book was written. It's the same book. And they called me in and they said, "We're concerned that no one is writing about this." And my face did what your face was doing. It's like, yeah, I did not say, "Are you effing kidding me?"
Yeah.
Or, "Gee, aren't you in the new idea business?" But right then, it wasn't going to happen. But one pushback I got from a lot of publishers was like, "How do we sell it?" To which I did not respond, "That's your job."
Right.
But the truth, there is some truth to the fact that everyone's getting older. But I need to reach the radical spirits wherever they may be. It could be an astronaut or an architect or a dog walker who is interested in what I have to say. And none of the other dog walkers in the park are, right? It's not, it is a question of politics and the stage you are in life and how you happen to be and if grandparents play a huge role. A lot of the people in gerontology had a really close relation with a grandparent. So when you mention organizations, a lot of people in Ageland are super ageist, which was a nasty shock to me. They are, a lot of the ways in which they develop their professional identities are involved with helping people at the neediest and most debilitated end of the spectrum, which is incredibly important work. And it's undervalued in our society because of ageism. But to rock that boat is threatening. Right. And to balance that view of old age, which is part of the spectrum, with what we hope lies ahead for ourselves is really, really hard. So I have also because I could afford to, and because I'm not really a joiner, there have been many organizations that have supported me. An early one was called Lifetime Arts, which does creative aging, which has become a whole big thing. But 15 years ago, it wasn't that much of one, but they understood right away that if they wanted to develop creative aging, we had to address the underlying culture change, right? You're not going to end discrimination in the workforce unless you address underlying issues towards age and aging or healthcare or. So I do stuff for medical people too, the ones who are ready to hear it, but it's not predictable where they happen to be.
Yes.
Now, your question was,
if you've seen a change.
I have seen, I mean, a very simple indicator is that I have a Google alert set to ageism. And there's more stuff on it all the time. A more scientific indicator would be that 3.5 years ago, 2 colleagues and I created this website called the Old School Anti-Ageism Clearinghouse, which you referenced. Does not roll off the tongue, as we know. But the URL is oldschool.info. And it came out of my idea that movements need tools. And this was a new movement. And I thought, wouldn't it have been amazing if the women's movement had had a central repository of really good vetted videos, books, all kinds of stuff. Now there's webinars on it. And I mean, take a look at it. There's tools, workshops, guides, guides to language, guides to working with blah, blah, blah. But all about ageism. The first thing we had to do was develop a letter to everyone saying, no, not about conscious aging or creative aging or positive aging, but about ageism. At that time, no, not ageism, not aging, right? Aging is such a huge field. And if you are out there putting something out that contradicts the prevailing cultural message that everything about aging is awful, we're on the same team. But you don't belong on Old School unless you are specifically addressing age discrimination and what we can do about it. And so and we were like, okay, no one's even going to know about this thing, but we're going to do it because it feels like a good idea and who knows what'll happen down the line. And the interest from whatever astronauts or dog walkers were out there who were interested in this was immediate. The site has grown by leaps and bounds. 6 months later, in answer to your question, we started a campaigns section for anti-ageism campaigns, not how to be healthy, not how to, how to educate people about ageism and dismantle it in your community, in your private life, in your personal life. And so I point to the campaign section. I mean, New York City, where I live, just started one. I wish they hadn't given it the incredibly ageist name of Ageless New York, because we shouldn't aspire to agelessness. Our years are what make us us, but I'll take it. San Francisco has a fantastic campaign. Australia has a brilliant national campaign called Every Age Counts. So, and I should say all the stuff on there is free, except the books. It's downloadable. It's open source. So noodle around.
Yeah. Congratulations.
So
that's amazing.
Thanks. That's how I know that things are changing. And given your audience, I want to mention that our little Old School team also creates workshops, and there's lots of others that we didn't create, workshops and guides to starting consciousness raising groups. And I already referenced how consciousness raising works. We are about to launch a guide called Ageist, Sexist, Who Me? Because the first one was Ageist, Who Me, right? Because the first step is like, oh crap, me too, which is a guide to looking at how ageism and sexism intersect and work in our lives. So that will be out really shortly. And I hope you will tell your listeners about it and encourage women to start their own consciousness raising groups, ideally with women of all ages. I think it's really easy for older women to forget how hard it is to be young and to be sort of caught up in resentment and envy. And I think there's a terrifying phrase in the first book to address this intersection called Look Me in the Eye, Old Woman, where Cynthia Rich writes that our power as younger women is measured by the distance we keep from older women under capitalism, under patriarchy, right? And that is corrosive.
Yes.
I mean, what happened to sisterhood? What happened to civil solidarity? And unless we break free of that way of thinking, we're stuck in it. And consciousness raising and having friends of all ages is how we do that.
I love the practical tips and the consciousness raising that you're doing. And I think that's so important for, even if it's with small groups, it gets bigger and bigger. And now you're saying that cities are doing it and these campaigns. So that's
But
fantastic.
I'm very excited about the women's in particular piece of it, because women are leading the movement against ageism, unsurprisingly. And there are so many women's groups coming out there now, of which yours is one, in which women are refusing to be quiet about menopause, letting their hair go gray and refusing to become invisible because of it, aging into our power and claiming that power. But ageism is not always explicitly on their radar, on their agenda. And as long as, and I'm going to put this in a very crude way, but as long as the women dealing with menopause are invested in still looking better than the older women going gray or the older whatever, as long as we're seeing it on a continuum of measuring how we look and do relative to other women on the age spectrum, we are supporting structures that are destructive to us collectively.
So I wanted on that, I wanted to get your opinion on something because it just came out and came out yesterday, but there was another article before in Forbes that how they have the 20 under 20 lists and they have, so this was a 50 over 50 list and they were looking at accomplished women over 50. And there was another follow-up article just yesterday. So it seems as though like major publications are going into that and getting more awareness. And do you think it's because they're forced to, or do you think it's because, do you know what I'm asking? Whether it's, it's a big question, but
I think culture change is slow.
Yes.
And people don't give up power without a struggle. We see that in, Susan Faludi's book, Backlash, is a history of the women's movement of the 20th century. And that was hugely important to me when I was writing Cutting Loose, my book about women and divorce. And it was about the backlash against the massive stride made by the second wave women's movement in the 70s and 80s. We saw a hideous backlash to Me Too, culminating for me with the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. People hold on to power. I'm just venturing a guess that Forbes, which publishes a ton of good pieces about ageism, about diversity in the workplace, but I'm guessing that most of the people in power there are white men still, who may, even with the best of intentions, not really feel like stepping back. So we have to, I was also influenced by, I think, back to competing with younger and older women in the context of the workforce. We may feel like, geez, there's only two places for women at the table, and either I'm going to get it or you're going to get it. So I'm going to use whatever is at my command.
Right.
And I used to say we should be competing for half the places at the table. And then I heard Ruth Bader Ginsburg's response to how many women would she like to see on the Supreme Court? And she said 9. So why aren't we competing for all the places on the table? We don't deserve them because we are women. We deserve them because we are qualified.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And
excellent.
Let's go for it. Let's go for it, girls.
Yeah, thanks for that. I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
You girls.
There is one concept that I've talked about as well, but you mentioned in your TED Talk about the midlife crisis and the U-curve of happiness. Well, I call it the midlife. I refer to the midlife crisis, and I want to take the word crisis out of midlife. But in what you're saying is that people are happiest at the beginning and at the end of their lives. And so it goes to say that the bottom is the middle life.
Indeed.
And so how do we, and this is what I'm trying to reverse, is to get the word crisis out of midlife. And what are your thoughts on that? And how can we it's kind of touched on with the ageism discussion, but more around midlife and how do we see it as an opportunity rather than this big thing ahead of us that, oh my God, I can't do anything anymore. I'm at this really unhappy stage of my life. And it doesn't mean that people have to go and buy Harleys and whatever, go to Eat, Pray, Love and
go to Sturgis.
Right. So it's just around the whole U-curve of happiness and that the trough is really.
Yeah. I mean, when I first encountered the U-curve of happiness, I was so skeptical. I thought they must have cornered 2 80-year-olds and given them a cookie and said, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, it must be true if you're healthy or true if you're wealthy or true in the West. And it is the data obtains across all different societies, independent of wealth, independent of marital status. And it is a function of the way aging itself affects the healthy brain. I don't love the word crisis because the reason it's branded as a crisis, of course, is because then we're going to click on it. The media, in feeble defense of the media, a headline about the true story of getting older, which is that most of us will muddle along in the middle just fine, slowed and stiffened, but continuing to do the things we love to do, even if we aren't doing a lot of them in the way we did when we were 20, which is oftentimes we do them better. But there are losses. It's mixy-uppy. It's complicated. It's messy. You're already snoring by the time I get to the end of that sentence. No one is going to click on most people muddling along just fine. They're going to click on crisis. They're going to click on panic. They are going to click on boomers ate all the good stuff and hate young people. So it is framed that way to get us to read about it. And I totally support you're resisting framing it as a crisis, although I do think it's really important not to soft pedal the fact that there are real challenges. I think I write about this in the introduction to the book. Once I learned that the scary stuff wasn't actually the case, then the pendulum sort of swings for a lot of people to this successful aging thing. Oh, if I eat enough kale and have the right attitude and find my passion, it's all going to be great. Yeah, it's all going to be a lot better because you have opened Pandora's box and looked at what's in it, and you will be better equipped to deal with whatever the future holds. But no one knows what the future holds, right? I mean, we're all going to experience some physical incapacity. Money helps, but it doesn't protect you, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Learning about aging conveys protection of all sorts, and that's free, especially if you go to old school. But so I think it's important to frame it as transition rather than crisis, because crisis implies that there's some turning point, like you have your shit together and then you don't, and then you do again. It took me a long time. I mean, I originally framed this as a project about older people who worked, and then that was boring and intuitively obvious. And I floundered for several extremely unhappy years, and which was a long time. And I had no plans to become a public speaker. I'm not a performer. None of that was foreseen, or was it something that I tried to make happen? So I think educate yourself as best you can, but also be prepared to try and see what happens and deal with it. For me, a conflict is like I'm sure I would have lots more followers on Instagram if I posted tons of pictures of my personal life, but I don't want to.
Right.
On the other hand, I lead a pretty public life. If you really want to find pictures of me, you'll find them.
Right. Well, I prefer to think of if you're in midlife and you feel like there's this abyss or whatever in front of you, like think of it as think of it as a reinvention of sorts. You have all this. You have the experience. You have the ability to take all of your experience and your wisdom and your knowledge. And if you really want to do something, reinvent yourself to your next best self, right? So this is... Or
your next pretty good self.
Or whatever.
Or yourself for next Tuesday.
Exactly. Yeah.
You don't have to see the whole future.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
I mean, at least I never have. But I've never had much of a plan.
Yes. Well, you touched upon all the great initiatives that you're doing, and there was one quote that I wanted in your talk that you said, we can keep digging the hole deeper, or we can throw away the damn shovel. We can move if we have the will and the desire and the vision from competing to collaborating. We can turn it from a conversation about scarcity and loss to one about empowerment and equity. And we can take that change out into the world. That was beautiful.
Here.
Yes.
I wrote that for women.
Yes. So any other things practical things that we can do, or any initiatives that you want to share that we can do to get this concept of ageism more known?
It's hard to top that last quote. And I think that if you ended with that quote, it would be beautiful. I hope you will suggest that people read the book, because I think it is really good. And it's available in an audio version read by me, if that's how you read. And the Kindle version is pretty cheap. But I have been thinking out loud about all of this on my blog, which is obviously free for anyone, which is thischairrocks.com/blog. I created Yo, Is This Ageist, which is a question and answer blog, because, as I've said, ageism is pretty unexamined. And so people send in things that they have seen or heard or done or read and ask my take on it. So that's a lot of very short Q&A, which I try and make funny and engaging. And I do little videos with them too. If you like what you see, I hate to say it, but share it. send it around and help get the word out. Follow me on social media if you're active on social media, and help spread the word. I mean, it doesn't, almost everything I do is free. And also Old School Clearinghouse. You find something you like, post it, tell your friends, and start that consciousness raising group.
Yes, it's a great idea. Well, all your links and your link to your book and your TED Talk will be on our show notes as well.
Thank you.
And I absolutely encourage everyone to read your book and to follow you and to do those consciousness awareness groups for sure. And thank you for all your knowledge and what you do is incredibly important. And I just wish that everybody was able to learn more from you. And I really appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Kavita. It's my pleasure.
It was such a pleasure to speak with Ashton on this important topic. Her passion for leading this emerging movement to raise awareness of ageism and how to dismantle it is fascinating, and we can all learn from it, as well as participate in spreading this awareness. Here are her key takeaways. Number 1, ageism is a discrimination and stereotyping on the basis of age. It is a set of ideas and social practices and the notion of making any kind of generalization about a person or a group of people on the basis of how old you think they are. It could be a complementary stereotype, and younger people also experience a lot of ageism as well. Number 2, there are so many surprising facts about ageism, such as the percentage of Americans in nursing homes is down from 4% to less than 2%, and that dementia rates are dropping, and that the longer people live, the less they fear dying, highlighting that our fears are way out of proportion to the reality. Number 3, aging is not something icky and depressing old people do. It is a journey upon which each of us embarks the day we are born. Aging is living. We don't wake up old someday. Number 4, you don't have to envision your purpose in its entirety. So many things start small. We create the path by walking it. Ask yourself, what do you want to do tomorrow? 5, the longer we live, the more different from one another we become. The older a person is, the less their age tells you about what they are like, what they are capable of, and what they are interested in. 6, when someone says they are too old, they might be too scared, they might be too poor, they might be so many other things, but it is never about age. And if we strip away the age from the equation, then we get to the underlying reasons. 7, both sexism and ageism pervade all aspects of our culture, as do race, as with gender. Number 8, as long as we are measuring how we look relative to other women on the age spectrum, we are supporting structures that are destructive to us collectively. And number 9, one reason midlife is so difficult is because of the conventional narrative that says, if you think it's bad now, it's all going to really suck. That is pure ageism. We trust that you are enjoying our amazing guests and the varied topics that we discuss and that we all face. Our goal is to bring these out into the forefront so we can all learn from them. I certainly hope you have enjoyed your summer and are looking forward to a beautiful fall season. I was able to take a little bit of a break these past few weeks, and I'm thrilled to soon be attending my niece's wedding after so much anticipation. I'm also so thrilled to announce our biggest reveal of Power Purpose Play to date. Next week, we will be launching our signature program, It's My Time Now, How to Rediscover Yourself in Midlife. And I am over the moon excited about it. This is our 8-week online and in-person comprehensive course, which will take you from confusion to clarity on your life's purpose moving forward. It is a culmination of all my work the last several years and has already been met with great reviews and profound results. Stay tuned for all the details of the course, how to enroll, and when it starts in next week's podcast. I can't wait for the big reveal. If you'd like to be put on the waiting list even prior to then, you can click on the link in the show notes and we will be sure to contact you. Or you can email me directly at kavita@powerpurposeplay.ca with any questions at all. I can't wait to be your guide on your journey of rediscovery. Until then, my friends, stay well and stay safe.